Welcome to episode 3 of Islington Mill and. Islington Mill and is a podcast series about the life, times, people and culture of one of the UK's most beloved artist-led creative centres, Salford's Islington Mill. For episode 3, I am joined by a very special guest, someone who I didn't have the chance to interview over the course of the Islington Mill is Queer podcasts, but that I made a special request to interview for Islington Mill and, especially as she did feature in episode 2 of Islington Mill and, which was part 2 of Modelling Queer Utopias, in which I spoke to all 4 members of the Islington Mill Creative Board. That would be Bill Campbell, his partner Maury Carlin, Rachel Goodyear, and today's guest, RIVCA Rubin. We've been planning a one-to-one interview with RIVCA for quite a while now, and I'm not going to do a very long intro to today's show, just to tell you that the topic is upwording, which is RIVCA's particular skill, and I will let her tell you, the listeners, what exactly upwording is. Let's hand it back now to myself with today's guest, RIVCA Rubin. RIVCA Rubin, welcome to episode 3 of Islington Mill and. Today we're here to talk about a topic, a subject. How would you describe upwording? What is upwording?
So thank you, Niall. It's a topic, a subject. I'd say it's a practice. Our invitation is to think of upwording as a practice, something that you engage in, that you can practice and you can bring into your life. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read this out a little bit.
Okay,
I think
sure.
It's quite well written.
Mm-hmm.
It's written, and we believe, and there is a growing we, that upwording is an essential element in the dismantling of oppressive systems.
Okay.
There's been quite a lot of, there's focus now on dismantling.
Yeah. Yes.
Superiority, oppression,
mm-hmm.
power over, control,
mm-hmm.
supremacy,
mm-hmm.
etc. And I'd see upwording very much as one of the fibres, as a very crucial, essential, central fibre. Mm-hmm. In the word of upwording, you already can hear it's around words. Mm-hmm. It's about vocabulary and concepts and beliefs that drive that. So what the practice of upwording does is invites us to become aware of linguistic tools that are constructed to enable hierarchies mm-hmm. of superiority and authoritarianism, be that patriarchy, white supremacy, and many more, mm-hmm. which have become such habitual components in our everyday communication that we mostly don't even notice. Mm-hmm. So upwording encourages us to notice those through the words we use when we speak with ourselves, mm-hmm. with others, when we think about ourselves, think about others, mm-hmm. and to co-create environments that are free from coercion and free from stress and free from anxiety, and where our microcosm impacts and reflects what we would love to see happening throughout the world.
Cool. Is there a straightforward example that you could share with us that displays how hierarchies of oppression are used through language?
Yeah. Let's start with control. Mm-hmm. Control is a form, control is a necessary element of domination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you exercise control?
Mm-hmm.
How do you can do it through force. You can use physical force to control a person, mm-hmm. an animal, a living being, by physically restraining or holding down. Mm-hmm. Now, physical force isn't enough alone, because if there was only physical force and the only way I can control you is one, I want to be stronger, mm-hmm. more able, more capable to do that, and I can't control each person through a physical force, so I require something else. Mm-hmm. So power, that kind of power, requires vocabulary based on the belief that actually control is crucial, i.e. to keep us safe, mm-hmm. to have order in mm-hmm. the world, etc., etc. So when we then go into the vocabulary, what words can I use in order to control others and myself? Must. I must do this. You must do that. We have to do it this way. We have to do it now. You should do. They should do. Or even we should have done.
Okay.
Do it now.
Do it now. And yes, I can see the implications of power in those statements. How, through the lens of upwording, how do you change that? Particularly something like, you must do that now, for instance.
Okay. So how you change that is actually, first of all, to notice that those words have just come out of my head and out of my mouth, and actually ask, do I have to do this? Do we have to? Do we need to do that? Do you have to? Now, I would say as a premise, and that may be a little challenging to the reader, to you, is there anything we have to do?
Okay, yeah. And if I was to say yes, there is something that we have to do.
For example?
For example, just to take an example out, if I noticed that something was smouldering in the corner, I would say we have to leave right now. There's a fire.
You could say we have to leave right now. It still doesn't mean I have to leave. I may choose to stay.
Yes.
You may choose to stay. I might choose instead to go, actually, I can deal with that fire. I'm going to put a blanket on it, or I've got some water, whatever. I've got a fire extinguisher. So I have a number of choices. But you'll certainly, in an emergency, go, leave. Now, at that moment, that kind of a demand or that order is out of an emergency and will be heard as such, because the intention is to keep me safe.
Yes.
So you've gone straight for, and it's really lovely, for an exception where the intention is not to coerce me into something. The intention is actually to keep me safe.
Yes.
So, of course, I will stop you, and probably even quite violently or physically, not violent, but physically, from running out on the road if I see a car coming at you, having or a child.
Yeah.
That is not coercion.
Yes.
That is not oppression, and that is not...
But, okay, here's another example. I just was smoking a cigarette there before we started the interview. You must not smoke near me or something, or... You
mustn't smoke, you shouldn't smoke, etc. Exactly. How effective is it when you're being told you shouldn't smoke, you mustn't smoke, don't smoke?
Not very.
At all?
It depends on the context, but I think... Now that I'm thinking about this off the top of my head, I also think there's a context of the relationship with the person who's saying it to you. Like, my mother smokes, and she would always say, you shouldn't smoke because I smoke and you shouldn't take it up. And up to a certain point in my life, I think I accepted that. And then when I hit a teenager, I was like, oh, I want to try what this smoking thing is like. And that's the point when it stopped having the impact that it should have had.
So there's a lot going on there, which is actually that in the end the should is not effective. It is for a little while, probably because of also the age and the implications and the consequences that could happen if you were found smoking for many people. But actually it becomes almost the opposite. That example of being told by somebody what you should do, the sort of the added thing that the must, which is a direct order, and often comes with us just refusing to do it because don't tell me what to do.
Yes.
The should as an added thing, which is a moralistic high ground.
Yeah.
You should not do that, or you should do more of that.
Yeah.
It's a really superior position.
Yeah.
From me, in this case, as the speaker telling you what you should do or not do or should have done, of knowing what is good for you, the right and wrong way of being and living. And therefore it gets even more rejection. It's more subtle because it's a hypothetical demand that is potentially more open for a no, because it has that moralistic overtone to it. It has even more potential to be ineffective. Yes, we start off on it because it's sold as should. It's good for me. It's good for me if I do more running. Even if I tell myself, I let it go because I actually haven't decided to do it. So it is still an externalized diktat. It is an externalized piece of advice that I haven't even asked for. Should is very much advice. Must is very much a demand or a command. Yeah. So, but they're external. Until I go, I want to, I will do, I'm prepared to, I choose to, I'd love to, I can't wait to, I am going to. Even just, I'm going to. At that moment, I internalize. That would be upwording.
Okay.
I have made it internal, I own it, I take responsibility for it. So that's around the should. And,
well, I mean, we've just come out of this. Obviously, we're 2 years into, I don't know where we stand in terms of the pandemic and where it's at now. People are still getting COVID, but it doesn't seem to be as lethal as it was 2 years ago. But that was a period of time, and it still kind of is to an extent, but not maybe as bad as it was 2 years ago, where people in positions of authority were using very direct commanding statements telling the population what we should and have to be doing. How did you see that from the point of view of upwarding? How did you see the kind of societal reaction, especially people in positions of authority, to trying to govern a population? Because it seems very clear to me as it was happening that, certainly at the most clearest at any point in my life, that I've seen people in positions of authority giving these demanding, commanding statements to the population, and quite a large proportion of the population actively going, no, I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. It's in your question. It's what you've just said. People were reacting. Now, you could also say the government and the health authorities were reacting, and we could go out of fear. And often when we feel afraid for somebody else, like you gave an earlier example about the fire, or I gave an example of running on the road, I will tell you what to do because at that moment I'm afraid for your life. So we unfortunately revert to telling people and trying therefore to really coerce and force people to do something that we believe, let's say at that moment government health authorities believe is the way to go in order to keep people safe. Now there's an argument around whether that was the only way or the best way, and people will question whether that was the route to take. What you were talking about, people were reacting by not doing it, is actually to the language used, not the content.
Okay.
I don't want them to tell me to wear masks. I don't want to be told what to do. Who are they to tell me? So people are really felt that domination, that force, that coercion through the words of must, and we're rebelling against the must.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I'll give you another example then, kind of slightly pandemic-y related, but for instance, say if you're in a coupling or you're in a relationship and you and your partner have perhaps over the course of the pandemic not been getting as much exercise as you would have been doing previously because our access to things are limited, and then a year into it you realise that you're a bit heavier than you were before, and you think we must eat more healthily or we should get more exercise. How would you reframe that? So
you might have done this, or imagine you would have done it. How effective is that? We must eat more healthily, we should do more exercise.
Yeah, I mean, not very.
Okay, and I would say the not very is probably two things. One, the very words you chose are demotivating. With the should, you're actually employing this moral high ground over yourself. And there's a little voice that kicks back that we might not even be aware of going, well, don't tell me what I should do. Who are you? Even in the self-talk.
Yeah.
Or, well, I know that, so why are you telling me I should do? I'm already aware of it. Because there's an implication of wrongness or stupidity in the should.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you because you don't already know what you should do. And it's like, especially if it comes from someone else. And the must as well, again, it will be demotivating. Now, the message itself may be one that is crucial and important. And again, I would say the moment you then go, okay, I hear myself saying I must, I should, or we should do more or less of this. Do we want to? Actually, we do want to. That's already a step into a decision ownership. Okay, how do we want to do it? How would we like to do this? And how would we enjoy doing this? More exercise and different food. Then we start looking at elements that have become appealing rather than getting away from something or losing something, i.e. losing weight, is not very motivating. But gaining more health because I choose to, I don't know, feel... for instance, for me, when I have a certain weight, I have less back problems. I like having my back free and not in pain. So I'm moving to actually having pain-free back.
Okay. Dialing it back, we've kind of, I think that this is a really good, clear, practical example of what upwarding is. I think going through those examples there is really, that's made a lot of sense to me. It's about, kind of noticing and being cognizant of the systems of control that are already in place in language and how to flip those systems of control, I assume, without negating the original potential message of something like public health, public safety, personal health and personal safety, because those things are valid and important. So here's a big question. Where did upwarding come from?
And I want to go to that question. I just want to get back just a little bit with a little bit more stuff, which is that the idea of the orders and the control domination is, specifically with the demands and the commands, is one element of a number. So we've just taken the must and the have tos and the should do's, the unasked for advice and so on. And also how that can, and I want to talk a little bit later about how we are using that, Bill and Maura and Rachel and myself, in the way we're communicating, so we can go back to that. And I just want to say there are more. There's a whole cause, effect and blame. There's a whole idea of labeling. There's a whole thing of diagnosing and analysing and creating limitations and division. So upwarding, I would say, has as a sort of big grouping 4 or 5 elements and then some additional ones. Okay. So just to put it into practice. And I really like hearing back how you've just said that, which is becoming aware of the words we use, which are then what is going on there, we can ask, because they're the manifestations. The words are just manifestations of things that we may notice are in place, like cause effect, orders, commands. And then we can, if we choose to create a shift to choice rather than force, to curiosity rather than being furious, it's another element. And when we make that choice, then we can use the words that go with it. So like we said before, instead of I have to, I choose to, I want to, I'm willing to, I'm prepared to, I'd love to, I can't wait to, I am going to. So where does upwarding come from? Okay, so upwarding has its roots, I would say, most strongly in non-violent communication. Which was something that was created by Marshall Rosenberg, who is no longer with us as of just a few years back, who I trained with. And it's very much based on a real understanding of basic human needs, taken from Maslow's list of hierarchy of needs, without the hierarchy. So let's say pretty much the same human needs, and looking at feelings as manifestations of met or unmet needs, and then also looking at language that might be either helpful or hindering, motivating or demotivating, limiting or liberating in my dialogue with you or myself. So upwarding, I would say, is literally a development of, an extension of, that focuses particularly on the language and communication, to enrich that communication between us and to liberate it. And like we've just seen, if I make a request to myself or to you, it is much more likely to be met with you wishing and us wishing to do it than if I make a demand on you.
I completely understand that. That seems very straightforward, kind of sound psychology. Upwarding is a practice. Is it also a discipline? Is it something that you can go and study? How did you personally come to be involved in upwarding? Okay,
so I go for the last bit first. So actually upwarding as a practice, as a word, as a something to engage with, some people call it a movement, came about in 2016 in collaboration with my...
Very new then, still very new.
5-6 years now.
6 years,
in collaboration with my colleague Charles Lauder, who is a freelance consultant, and the birth was in 2016, a moment when we just sat, actually was in the car, and I was thinking, okay, what do you think? Is there something useful in having a practice that specifically invites us to notice the words that we use that are inadvertently upholding the very authoritarian oppressive systems that an increasing number of people are wishing to dismantle. Because I've noticed that we are dismantling them with the same tools.
Yes, absolutely.
That upkeep the master's house, if you like.
Yeah.
So 2016, and then with some playing around with what are the elements and how can we present it. Out of it came a first Upwording introduction in the form of a PowerPoint with images and exercises, which have now developed and have had a number of iterations. And then myself and now Charles and various other people have started to disseminate that. Well, I've been doing it now for the last, since 2017 really, in this country, widely in Europe, also with NGOs that I work with in South Africa and in Swaziland and Colombia and Israel and various other places, reaching probably by now around 10,000 people who have reached others. So that's through introductions of Upwording and also the other training that I deliver as a, if you like, trainer, coach, mediator, moderator, and trainer of trainers, etc., etc. Upwording is an integral element to all those approaches. When I work with, and I'll just finish there in a minute, the main work is working with organizations in the cultural sector and NGO sector mainly, and that can be big organizations and tiny little groups and teams who wish to improve their communication, develop their communications with one another, to have really rich, satisfying workplaces.
How did you become involved with Islington Mill then? How has Upwording become so important to Islington Mill, but also how have you?
Okay, yeah, how's Upwording actually become important to the Mill, to us? Right, I'd say that starting point is a joint interest in not exercising power over people. Any form of power over anybody at any time. And that includes in moments when actually you kind of by habit want to make people do things, and we definitely don't ever want to make people do things with any form of coercion, including each other. So the first point was really for us to see what happens if we really notice and let go of all language that is coercive, divisive and limiting, labelling, polarised, superior, and replace it with language that is always about describing, inviting, asking, so people are, all of us, communicate with each other always out of a real conscious choice. That doesn't mean that everything we do we really love to do, because there's things that aren't that exciting and can be pretty hard work and also quite, stretches. They are nevertheless always out of a conscious choice of being willing to do, like I said before. So we are very, very rigorous in assuring that we don't fall into musts and have-tos, because I feel that every time I use the word must or should and give it right, etc., I am upholding a vocabulary that belongs to systems of superiority and supremacy, and I don't want to, which of course with the exception that we had, I think, a little bit earlier, where it is the intention that drives it. If your intention is to keep me safe and you go, get out the way, and it is an order demand, it is done by an intention to keep me safe. Equally, I must say to you, equally I might say to you, that was just a slip, and not a Freudian one. I've seen this film. What is it? And I've still not seen everything, everywhere, all at once. And people have said, "Good, you must see it." Now I hear that as an invitation. Like it was I really liked it so much that I really want you to see. You must see it. That's said in the spirit of an intention of invitation. It is not. You must see this film because it'll be good for you. That kind of thing. Yeah. So we're very rigorous with the language you use, and it's like a friend of mine said, a few years ago when we were speaking about upwording at the beginning, she said, yeah, and I know all this, because of course it's nothing new that we're proposing. It's already there. We already know. And she said, but I'm really sloppy with it. And I think it's time for us not to be sloppy.
Yeah. To make it a practice.
To make it a practice, exactly. Yeah. And that is also not about, I must replace all my musts. I should never say should. It is not that. That becomes again coercive and policing. It's about noticing. It's an invitation to notice and go, oh, okay, what am I actually doing here to myself and with each other? Yeah, so we don't want to make anybody do anything.
Yeah. I'm going to sidetrack this a little bit because I've realised that when I was doing the previous podcast, Islington Mill is Queer, which was about documenting the history of the mill as well, one question that I always ask interviewees was, do you remember the first time you came to Islington Mill? Do you remember the first time you came to Islington? How did you discover Islington Mill, this place?
So the first time that I came was when there was an event throughout. It felt like the whole mill. I think it was a number of floors, which was the TV series that I was one of the few people that had never actually seen it.
Oh, Four in a Bed?
No. The long, many series and a number of characters, and my daughter was in it, and Laurie Evans was in it. There's a murder. Starts with a murder. Is it a David Lynch one?
Oh, yes. Twin Peaks?
Twin Peaks.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't know if it's David Lynch. Sorry, I'm just sort of throwing names out. But okay.
Yeah. That was a long time ago.
Okay, so Twin Peaks event was with so my daughter, Roshana Rubin Mayhew, also was an artist here, did a residency at one point in the gallery. But that's the first time I came to it through this event. And I would say that was, maybe 17 years ago, 16 years ago? Is that possible?
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Yeah, so she would have been, And that was my first discovery. And I really remember this place as most exciting to me because it felt like a labyrinth. And however they had styled it, I don't even remember it as I now know the mill in being several floors. I remember moving from one place to another place and then suddenly going up and moving to yet another place. And it was just incredible. And I think now that I look back, what it will have been is downstairs, the gallery, the hallway, what was then called the venue, and the first floor, the common room and everything, and maybe it even went beyond. Maybe it even went to the 5th floor. I don't particularly remember. I just went into this like incredible space of theatrical delights and discovery.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I did go to a few events here, a few nightclub nights during the Fat Out time, and then I also was part of my daughter's project, which was in the gallery, where over a week or longer, maybe 10 days, she had people sleeping in the gallery, falling asleep. So she was filming us falling asleep, sleeping, like deep sleep, middle of the night, and waking up.
That's interesting.
So I slept in the gallery, surrounded by, obviously the glass where people could actually see me sleeping, or us sleeping, because she was also there at times, of course, to do the filming. Yeah.
Did you find it hard to fall asleep knowing that you were being filmed?
Nah. I sleep really well anywhere, actually. Yeah, it was quite exciting, actually, because if I sleep, I just sleep, and I don't care. I mean, it's not that exciting, I guess. I mean, I don't know what I was doing, but
that is one of those things that, yes, we should sleep, but your body has to sleep as well. There is a choice element in sleeping, but also not, because
there's a lot of choice element in where I sleep.
Yes.
How I sleep. There's definitely a choice in when I sleep, because otherwise we wouldn't have such a high thing of health and well-being, because the whole thing of we have to do all these things which are related to being productive, which is very capitalist, always having to do quantity and fast, and being stressed is actually quite a symptom of it, because the more stressed I am, the more I do, the more valuable I am, or I think I am. So actually often we deprive ourselves of sleep because we push ourselves. So actually we are exercising a choice of not sleeping because we feel we have to, must do, should do more.
Yes, that is true. And it's, like you said, it's based on quantity rather than quality. I think what I was trying to articulate before with the pandemic and seeing people's active the disavowal of the messages they were being told to do, the commands that they were being commanded to do, and their active refusal of those commands. I think the bigger picture that I feel that was happening there is that people are really waking up to the capitalist, late capitalist, patriarchal, almost totalitarian capitalism that we live under now doesn't really function for our own well-being, for our own good. And yet we were being fed these messages from authority that, oh, this is for your well-being. But we all know that we're deeply entrenched in a system that isn't about our well-being anyway.
No, so actually people don't believe. Because a lot of information has been information that necessarily isn't the only information. Also the whole sort of coercive power over system is actually based on also teaching children quite early on not to trust people. Don't trust others. So mistrust in others is actually one of the foundational things about creating a system where you have a hierarchy. Because when you can't trust people, you've got to control them. You've got to control them and tell them to be good, because you teach people to believe that we're born bad. So this is getting a lot more complex, and I'd love to do more and make a separate one. But I think on one hand, yes, people have woken up to this system of superiority and supremacy and patriarchy, etc., which serves some through control over others, the power over rather than the power with. And at the same time, it's also the very language used, you must do this for your own good, is a mix of, well, we don't trust you, that it is actually for your own good.
Yes. Yeah,
and at the same time, it speaks to the how do I not want to be spoken to. Niall, I've not met anybody yet who likes being told what to do, unless they have agreed to, because they're joining the army. Therefore, I give consent to you telling me. Or I'm really exhausted. I go, actually, please don't teach me how to make it. Just tell me the information, whether it's a dish or something else. I'm tired. Just tell me. I'm giving you permission to tell me. But other than that, nobody likes being told what to do.
Yeah.
We like being invited and asked and requested.
Yes. It's always much easier to get someone to do something, for want of a better phrase, by having them come to that conclusion that it's the thing to do themselves, rather than telling them.
Exactly. And the conclusion is because I come to the conclusion that this is useful for me, delightful for me, I'd like to do it, it has an impact on me and others. It might be because actually it'd be nice for you, so therefore I choose to do it. And again, I think where it's more subtle is to move away. I choose to move away from getting people to do things, because that's still coercive. Therefore, if I then want to get you to do something, I want to make you do something, and therefore I use requests, I'm actually still in the coercive territory, whereby can I even go away, move away from that, and quite honestly just invite you to do something I'd love you to do, because it would really assist me. It may also assist you.
Like the Islington Mill is currently at it's entering into another phase of its existence at the moment. It's coming to the end of the long process of having reconstruction and building work done on it, and an injection of money that has been used to push the mill forward into the next phase of its existence. How is Upwording going to be integrated into this? What is is there like a practical example that you could explain to me now about how Upwording is going to be integrated into future plans for Islington Mill moving forward into this next phase of its existence?
Yeah, and I think also based on what we've already done. So we will continue to form and nurture all our partnerships, including with funders, in such a way that we always come out of a real conscious decision of engaging in something and checking if we wish to, are prepared to and agree with the criteria that is being asked of us to then deliver to uphold. So we see all our relationships as with others, never under or above. Yeah. So it's really this. It's in a partnership, and it's a conscious choice that we've already engaged in. We want to make sure that everybody is fear-free. When engaging with somebody else. So we're neither dictated to or dictate to others. We don't want to be in an expert position of deciding people's, being juries and judges and panels. We want to make co-make decisions with others using criteria that are co-created, that everything is actually co-worked out and co-created. That doesn't mean we always all sit together to co-create everything, but what we do is in our pockets, our tribes and individually, is work on something and then bring it to others for further exploration, because actually the voices together always create more than one. It makes it so much richer and deeper. So one is the relationships that we build, which are always, how would we love it to be? How would we like to work together, co-creating a climate and maintaining that climate? We definitely don't want to have rules and regulations ever imposed onto others. We always have co-created rules of how we want to be. So that's one. The other thing is in our dialogues with each other within the team, certainly the four of us would never go, we have to do something, or it must be done, or you have to do it. We're not forcing other people to give up musts and shoulds. And it can take a while to give them up, because actually we've learned that should is a way to get things done. It's quite hard to give that up at times, So the other thing is how to sort of embed it further is that already about 4 years ago, we did the first Upwording presentation, to which a number of tenants and members of the team and people from the outside and temporary custodians and partners and interested parties and strangers came in, and in those 2 hours took away the basic elements of the 4 or 5 elements like I mentioned, and incorporated them into their lives and into their work to greater or less extent. Some people have fully done that and shared it on. Some people go, yes, I've done a little bit and then I keep forgetting, but I'm aware now. I'm a lot more aware. So we've repeated those about 3 or 4 times, and every time new people come in, and that will now increase, is that we make that a very regular space, and not only delivered by me, but to be beginning to be delivered by other people who are part of the team, studio holders, part of the community, so that people get, if you like, upskilled. So capacity building is that actually can ripple throughout, and we believe it ripples.
It is interesting. This kind of calls back to something that I spoke with Bill about in the first episode of this series, about these are kind of skill sets that are not necessarily open that frequently to artists and people in creative fields, because there's this kind of, from my own personal experience as well, there's this kind of feeling around when you are creative or you're an artist that you are your own boss, and that is something that is obviously it's something that can be cherished if it's in the right context, because ultimately I think everyone would like to be their own boss, but you're certainly not taught the skill set as an artist, I don't believe, in terms of how to communicate with other people. There is a collaborative spirit to art, but it can be messy, because this isn't a skill set that specifically artists are told, but people in general are told either, but also in the kind of world of the arts, and fine arts in particular, it's always this very individualistic pursuit. So the idea of how to communicate clearly with other people when it's a collaborative process so that everyone is going for the same thing.
Yeah, there's a lot in there in what you've just said, and I think a few things I want to pick up. One is, in a way, the difficulty of really collaborating, co-creating, wishing to co-design is a departure from what we have been and still are to more of a greater and less extent taught, which is to be competitive. And the moment you've got the competitive, which is look out for yourself, there's a lot of people in the business, you've got to forge your own, also means that you then don't necessarily share your ideas, because if you share your ideas, they're no longer yours. So the whole concept of letting go of ownership of ideas, and at the same time have a uniqueness to your own work. One of the things which are on the Mills just now, scaffolding thing, is uniquely united, which is a phrase I've created a little while back, which we've started using, which is actually how we can be unique and be united and be really generous. Because we know that if I share the idea, which of course generally doesn't come from, it's totally fresh and totally new, it's always influenced by everything that's come before. And we can argue decades and years and millennia before have led to that moment with everything around. It's not done in isolation. But maybe taking away a bit of that ownership and looking at my uniqueness and interpreting that with my particular layers of life. And yet it becomes richer if I share that out, and you can input into that. So I think that's going on. And the other thing is, because of that focus, and it is capitalist of the I, and what can I get, and me and my family, my little tribe, we have really lost, let's say we're not particularly practiced in thinking we. What's going to happen to me, my thing, my surrounding, my salary, my studio, and sometimes it's like, and you're a bit annoying in this, because now I've got to think about you as well. Rather than actually, I really want to think about you, because you and I are greater together. And you isn't just the yous that are like me. Yous are the yous that I don't even know, will never know and meet. And ideally, those who don't share the same views as me. Because there are multiple views. There's about multifarious thinking. And that is then moving away from also what we've often practiced, which is, where do you sit? Is it this or that? Is it either or? It's very polarized, very binary. There's one way, the better way, the success, the failure, rather than actually there's a number of views. And if we go there, then even the difficult topics in communication, I'm coming back to communication between us, means we don't need to go into a battle. We don't need to. We can avoid going into any opposition by going, great, there is a different view. May not sit that well with me at the moment or ever. I'd like to learn more. I'd like to find out more. What's in your thinking? Oh, look, we're actually having a crossover here. We're having a meeting point. And then somebody else has another view and another view and another view and another view, and there'll always be crossover points. So coming back to the communication, more curious. If we can begin to practice, especially if I hear something I don't like or doesn't sit with me yet, or isn't aligning, or I don't understand, that let's say a knee-jerk reaction would go into, say more. I'm curious to understand more, rather than maybe being furious or feeling attacked or challenged and then going into a defensive and trying to convince you of mine. Because all of that is divisive. So that's one of the things around communication. And another thing, and I'll add that, is that how can I share something with you in such a way that actually you can and want to engage with it, because I'm already at the point of departure of sharing something, interested in how you receive and what you have to say about it. So basically, now what I'm saying is it all comes back to intention. Of mutually, a mutual something, a mutually agreeable outcome, a mutually agreeable solution, a mutually doable something of mutual benefit, of mutual impact.
Okay. This is, okay, I think I'll make this the last question for now. Although we have spoken off microphone about continuing this interview series, because there are more elements of, like the relationship between upwording and neuro-linguistic programming we discussed before, and you said that you'd quite like to do a full podcast on that, which would be great, because it is, in my limited experience of these kind of things, it does sound similar to neuro-linguistic programming, but you said, would you like to say that yourself?
I can say a little bit, which is, I did do training in neuro-linguistic programming, also called NLP. Before I did nonviolent communication, NVC, and various other things, thinking systems theories, and other approaches, choice theory, etc. And I would say that there's some stuff within NLP that is highly useful in terms of us understanding where we're limiting, like a nominalization, like a relationship, and what's the problem with my relationship, or to going, and how I'm actually relating, taking it into movement. There's quite a lot linguistically in there that's useful. The issue with NLP, I find, is that I think sadly a lot of people are taking it as something that if you train in NLP, you are superior in some way. That's the bit of, I think, an interpretation of the ethos that doesn't require to be there at all. Because then it also can become very easily coercive and manipulative. And we notice, and that's why there's been such a reaction against NLP. Whereas when actually used in a no cursive way at all, and I think the title is a problem, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, it would have been maybe more useful to call it Neuro-Linguistic Repatterning, which meaning when there's patterns that have kicked in that are not helpful to me, to you and us, that we can actually repattern that so things are not fixed. Yes, love to talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely do another full podcast on that, because that is fascinating to me. And I'm sure that there are other threads to do with upwording that we'll cover in future podcasts. But I'll just end it now with a question, which I think is fairly straightforward, but also might be a really massive question. But we're living in an era now where discourse is more prevalent than ever. And people have much more means of interacting verbally with each other than we ever have in the past. Yet it feels to me, especially through media like social media, that the quality of our discourse is rapidly dwindling. I mean, would you agree with that, though? Would you agree that we are living in a more discursive age, but also perhaps is our level of how to discuss things with people, specifically people who have a very different view of things to us, is getting worse?
I wouldn't say it's getting necessarily worse. I think that which has been there has got louder.
Okay.
It is much quicker to give a comment, especially as it can be done behind a screen.
Yeah.
Because we're being brought up, this is just how I choose to see it, because a lot of the upbringing is still to label, to evaluate, to call something right or wrong or good or bad. I can very quickly make a statement or a judgment, and that's one other area in upwording, is around judgments, making judgments rather than remaining descriptive.
Yeah.
So I'll pass judgment because I'm taught to pass judgment. I'm also taught not to trust. I've got to read between the lines. What do you really mean? There's a lot of analysis and interpretation that is really unhelpful in connection, because it is actually about, I'm going to pass judgment and I'm already dividing. Yeah. And I put myself in a superior position. Anyway, I think this is just something that we haven't really at the moment got, I'd say, we're not very practiced in communicating in order to find connection within communication.
Yeah.
To do that wants to be a letting go of passing judgment, a letting go of analysis, and actually really being curious in that. The pub talk, have you heard the latest, isn't it bad? And they're not actually going rigorously into anything, and passing judgment on who is to blame is really problematic, because it's who is to blame. Do you agree with this or that? Where do you stand? So I think there is a time ahead where it's almost like really unlearning. In a book recently I heard a reference to, wouldn't it be great to have a school of unlearning? And I think we really want to do that. I think it's already happening, unlearning certain things in order to learn a fresh way of engaging with one another that is curious, that is about having a resourceful position to continue to listen to you when you say something that I find abhorrent, because clearly you believe in it. Or that person believes in it. They wouldn't say it if they didn't believe in it, as much as what I'm putting forward I believe in. Now if I can then stay away from going, but mine is better than yours, well of course you're going, well my opinion is better than yours, we can avoid that battle of no mine's better, no yours is better, no mine is better. So there is a lot to learn. I think upwording is an absolute crucial fibre and element in doing that, because we can undo those elements of language and polarizations and judgments, and find new ways of communicating in a way that we can remain in what Charles and I call a crucial, critical conversation. which is really crucial to have now on various topics,
Yes.
where we want to find a connection, not a division, because that is used by those
Absolutely.
in the world,
Yeah.
the Trumps, in order to keep people apart and controlled.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's an excellent answer to the question I had there, which, yeah, it could be... I think, yeah, it is basically... I feel like sometimes social media can be engineered with those tactics in mind to create division rather than communication, rather than true understanding and some kind of unity, not necessarily of ideas or of outlook, but some kind of just unifying factor that we're human beings who can still communicate with each other. Yeah, okay. I'm going to end it there for now, but I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations in future. And is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up?
I really look forward to exploring more in detail, because now my head is feel really inspired and I want to say more on all kinds of things. And I think it is worth taking the time for us as people, taking more time, slowing down, and actually really exploring these conversations and what are the elements that we can add and how can we actually really look forward to something which at the moment is a mess. And sometimes it feels like it will get really, really bad before actually you can sort of clear the ground and start again and grow new things. The seeds have been sown, the shoots are growing, the little, seedlings. I think it's there. There's a hunger there for a fresh way of being. It also requires to choose to let go of things and choose to refuse to uphold inadvertently systems that no longer serve us.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.